My name is Ethan. I never thought I'd be posting here, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you. My wife, Megan, and I have been married for 10 years, and we have an amazing 8-year-old son, Jacob. From the outside, our life seemed perfect: a nice house in the suburbs, weekend soccer games, and holiday road trips. But lately, things haven't felt right. It started about 6 months ago when Jacob began struggling in school. He's a bright kid, but math has always been his kryptonite. Megan, being the fiercely ambitious person she is, decided to take matters into her own hands. She wanted Jacob to excel, not just do okay, and that's when she started spending a lot of time at his school. At first, I thought it was sweet. She was volunteering at PTA meetings, organizing bake sales, and working closely with his teacher. But then, she started mentioning the principal, Mr. Bradley. Apparently, he was super supportive of her efforts to help Jacob. She'd come home talking about their meetings, and how Mr. Bradley was such a visionary. I didn't think much of it at first. Megan's always been passionate about our son's education, and Mr. Bradley seemed like a decent guy. He was in his mid-40s, wore suits that were just a little too sharp for a middle school principal, and had a way of commanding a room. I remember meeting him once at a parent-teacher conference. He gave me this firm handshake and said, "Jacob's lucky to have such a supportive family." But then things started to shift. Megan began dressing up a bit more than usual when heading to school events, skirts and blouses instead of her usual jeans and sweaters. She even got her hair done one afternoon before a PTA meeting, which felt out of character. "It's just nice to feel put together," she said when I asked about it. I wanted to trust her, but something in my gut felt off. There were other little things, too. She became protective of her phone, which wasn't like her. Normally, she'd leave it lying around, but now it was always in her hand or tucked away in her bag. When I casually asked why, she laughed it off, saying, "It's just a lot of PTA messages and school updates. You wouldn't be interested." The weirdest thing, though, was her sudden obsession with Jacob's grades. She'd always cared, sure, but now she was laser-focused. She'd check the online grade portal every day, call the teacher to discuss progress, and quiz Jacob relentlessly at dinner. I started to feel like she wasn't just pushing Jacob for his sake, there was something else going on. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. Megan's always been intense, and Jacob's school performance had been a source of stress for both of us. But then there was the night she came home late. It was a Tuesday, and she said she'd been at a strategy session for an upcoming PTA fundraiser. She looked flustered and was quick to brush off my questions about the event. "It was just boring stuff," she said, heading straight for the shower. That was the first night I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. "This story is just getting started. Let me know if you want me to keep going." After that night, I couldn't let the uneasiness go. Every little detail started to stand out, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. Megan's new PTA obsession became a running joke in my head. "What's next? Running for school board?" I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. The truth was, it was starting to feel less funny and more calculated. Jacob's grades were improving, which should have been great news. Megan was thrilled, and even Mr. Bradley started sending home glowing notes about Jacob's remarkable progress. But something about it all felt too good to be true. Jacob himself wasn't all that excited. He'd shrug when we praised him, saying, "Mom just wants me to do well. That's all." His enthusiasm seemed dimmed, like the pressure was weighing on him. And then there was Megan's increasing number of late nights. She called them emergency meetings for PTA events or last-minute planning sessions with school staff. One night, I asked her if she wanted me to tag along. I figured if she was truly overwhelmed, I could help out. Her reaction was soft. She laughed, a little too loud, and said, "Oh, Ethan, it's just a bunch of moms and Mr. Bradley arguing over budgets and bake sale tables. You'd be bored out of your mind." "Maybe," I replied, forcing a smile. "But it might be nice to see what you've been up to." She waved me off, grabbing her purse and heading out the door. Another time, babe. She called over her shoulder. Tonight's chaos. It wasn't just the lateness. She'd started acting defensive. If I asked even a casual question about her meetings, she'd brush me off. Once, when I asked why she was getting so involved, she snapped. Why do you care? Isn't it enough that I'm doing what's best for Jacob? Her tone caught me off guard. It wasn't like Megan to get so sharp, especially about something that, on the surface, seemed so mundane. But it was the next part that stuck with me. As she turned away, she mumbled, "At least someone's stepping up for him." That stung. Was that what she thought? That I wasn't doing enough for our son? I'd been working long hours to provide for us, juggling deadlines and meetings, making sure Jacob had everything he needed. But somehow, it felt like Megan was keeping score, and I was losing. Then came the night that really set my suspicions on fire. It was a Friday, and Megan was supposed to be home by 9 p.m. after reviewing fundraiser details at the school. But by 11:30, she still wasn't back. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted, and an hour later, she finally replied, "Sorry, late meeting ran over. Be home soon." When she walked through the door, her hair was slightly mussed, and she had this strange, flushed look. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She froze, just for a second, before smoothing her face into a practiced smile. "Yeah, just stressful planning stuff. Mr. Bradley is such a perfectionist, it took forever to finalize things." I nodded, though her words left a bitter taste in my mouth. "You know, you've been spending a lot of time with him lately," I said, testing the waters. "You two must have the PDA running like a well-oiled machine." She laughed, but it felt forced. "Oh, please, Ethan. He's the principal. He has to be involved." I didn't push it then, but the seed of doubt had already sprouted. Later that night, while she slept, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, the uneasy feeling in my chest growing heavier. My instincts were screaming at me that something wasn't right. I just didn't know what to do about it, yet. The tension was building, and I could feel the cracks widening. But the part that scared me the most? I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was really going on. A few days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello, this is Ethan," I said, balancing my phone between my ear and shoulder as I typed an email. There was a pause on the other end before a woman's voice spoke, sharp and laced with accusation. "Mr. Harper, this is Ms. Riley, Jacob's math teacher." I stopped typing and sat up straight. "Oh, hi, Ms. Riley. Is everything okay? Is Jacob?" She cut me off before I could finish. "Let's not play games, Mr. Harper. I think you know exactly why I'm calling." Her tone threw me off completely. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Did something happen at school?" Another pause, and then she sighed loudly, as if I were exhausting her patience. "Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's become glaringly obvious that Jacob's sudden improvement in math isn't natural. And I'm not just talking about hard work." I frowned, confusion and irritation bubbling up. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying," she snapped, her voice growing colder, "that your family seems to have found alternative methods to ensure Jacob's success. And don't act clueless. We both know what I'm talking about." I was stunned. "Alternative methods? Ms. Riley, I have no idea what you're suggesting." "Oh, please," she hissed. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think the entire staff hasn't noticed how closely your wife has been working with Mr. Bradley? It doesn't take a genius to put two and two together." I felt my stomach drop, a knot forming instantly. "I'm still not following," I said, my voice firm now. "What does Megan's involvement in the PDA have to do with Jacob's grades?" There was a moment of silence before she spoke again, her tone low and threatening. "You can stop pretending, Mr. Harper. Here's the deal. If Jacob's grades continue to magically soar without explanation, I will have no choice but to bring this up to the school board. And trust me, they won't take kindly to accusations of bribery or personal favors influencing academic records. My heart pounded, her words hitting me like a slap in the face. Bribery? Personal favors? Are you seriously accusing us of something like that? You have no proof. I don't need proof, she interrupted, her voice icy. All I need is suspicion. And right now, there's plenty of it. If you care about your family's reputation, you'll put an end to whatever's going on before it blows up in your faces. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. You're out of line, Ms. Riley. I'm going to need a lot more than baseless accusations before you threaten my family. She gave a humorless laugh. Baseless? We'll see about that. This is your warning, Mr. Harper. Fix it or I will. With that, the line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart racing. Her words echoed in my head, and for the first time, I wondered if there was something going on that I didn't know about. Something Megan hadn't told me. Things were unraveling fast. That evening, as soon as Megan walked through the door, I decided I wasn't going to wait. Ms. Riley's call was still burning in my mind, and I couldn't shake the knot of unease in my gut. Megan looked distracted, juggling her purse and a stack of papers as she kicked off her heels. Hey, hon, she said absent-mindedly, heading toward the kitchen. I followed her, keeping my tone calm but firm. We need to talk. She stopped, halfway to the fridge, and glanced at me with a raised brow. Sounds serious. What's up? I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. Ms. Riley called me today. The casual look on her face faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly, setting the papers down. Ms. Riley? Jacob's teacher? Why would she be calling you? That's what I wanted to know, I said evenly. She had some interesting things to say. Megan's eyes narrowed, her voice dipping into irritation. Oh, let me guess. Another complaint about Jacob's progress? She air-quoted the word and rolled her eyes. She's been nitpicking everything lately. I told Mr. Bradley she's clearly biased against him. She accused us of bribing Mr. Bradley to boost Jacob's grades, I said bluntly, watching her reaction closely. Megan froze, her hand hovering over the fridge handle. Slowly, she turned to face me, a mix of confusion and annoyance flashing across her face. She what? That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked, my voice firmer now. She seemed pretty sure there was something going on between you and Mr. Bradley. Megan's jaw dropped, and her expression shifted to outrage. You're kidding me, right? You think I'm bribing the principal? I held her gaze, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't say I believed her. I'm just telling you what she said. She seemed pretty convinced there's something going on. Megan huffed, throwing her hands up. That woman has been a thorn in my side since day one. She's threatened to bring Jacob's grades into question before. Now she's just escalating. It's insane. Is it? I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Because you have been spending a lot of time with Mr. Bradley. And the way Ms. Riley said it, she seemed sure there was more to the story. Her face flushed red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. More to the story? Ethan, you've met Mr. Bradley. He's a professional. Everything I've done has been for Jacob. And now you're standing here accusing me, too? I'm not accusing you, I said, though the defensiveness in her tone wasn't helping. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Riley's threatening to go to the school board, Megan. Do you realize how bad this could get? She crossed her arms, glaring at me. Bad? For what? For me volunteering my time to help our son succeed? Honestly, Ethan, I can't believe you're even entertaining this nonsense. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It's not nonsense if someone's threatening legal action, Megan. She said if Jacob keeps improving without a clear explanation, she's going to push the board to investigate. She told me not to pretend like I didn't know. What am I supposed to think? Megan softened slightly, her arms dropping to her sides. Ethan, listen to me. Everything I've done, all the meetings, all the late nights, it's been for Jacob. I've been working closely with Mr. Bradley to create extra resources, like tutoring programs and enrichment activities. That's why his grades are improving. It's nothing underhanded. Then why didn't you just tell me that? I pressed. Because you've been so wrapped up in work, Ethan. She shot back, her voice tinged with frustration. Every time I try to talk about school, you brush it off like it's no big deal. I didn't think you'd care about the details. I opened my mouth to argue but stopped. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had been pretty checked out when it came to Jacob's school lately. Still, something about this felt off. Megan stepped closer, her expression softening further. Look, I get that this has all come out of nowhere for you. But if you're worried about what Ms. Riley said, why don't you come to one of these meetings? See for yourself what I'm doing. I hesitated, caught off guard by her suggestion. You're serious? Of course, she said, nodding firmly. The next meeting is tomorrow night at the school. Come with me, meet the PTA, meet Mr. Bradley, and see exactly what's going on. Maybe then you'll realize how ridiculous Ms. Riley's accusations are. I studied her face, searching for any sign of hesitation, but she looked completely sincere. Fine, I said finally. I'll come. But I'm not just doing this to prove her wrong, Megan. If something doesn't feel right, we're going to talk about it. Fair enough, she said, reaching for her papers. You'll see, Ethan. There's nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as she walked away, a flicker of doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Something told me that tomorrow night wasn't going to be as simple as she made it sound. The next evening, I arrived at Jacob's school with Megan. She seemed completely at ease, chatting about mundane things on the way, what we'd have for dinner tomorrow, how Jacob's soccer practice was going, and a reminder to RSVP for an upcoming birthday party. Her relaxed demeanor almost made me feel guilty for doubting her. Almost. The school was eerily quiet as we walked down the hallway, Megan leading the way. I'd been here plenty of times for parent-teacher conferences and open houses, but tonight, the place felt different. Maybe it was the tension I was carrying, or the fact that I'd never really been involved in the PTA world. When we stepped into the meeting room, I was surprised to see how normal everything was. A group of parents sat around a rectangular table, sipping coffee from styrofoam cups and flipping through stacks of printed agendas. Mr. Bradley stood at the front of the room, setting up a projector. He glanced up when we entered and greeted us with a warm smile. Ethan, nice to see you again, he said, stepping forward to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his expression welcoming. You too, I replied, trying to mask the unease bubbling beneath the surface. Glad you could join us tonight, he said. Megan's been a great asset to the team. I forced a smile, nodding. She's been telling me about the work you're all doing. He gestured toward the table. Well, let's get started. Feel free to grab a coffee and a seat. Megan gave my arm a reassuring squeeze as she pulled out a chair. I followed her lead, settling in beside her as Mr. Bradley began the meeting. For the next hour, it was exactly what you'd expect from a PTA gathering. They discussed fundraising goals, the logistics of upcoming events, and ways to improve after-school programs. Megan chimed in occasionally, her voice confident and her suggestions well received. Mr. Bradley remained professional throughout, answering questions and guiding the conversation with ease. At one point, a mom sitting across from me joked about how the bake sale had been more stressful than her actual job, and the room erupted in laughter. It was ordinary. No secret glances between Megan and Mr. Bradley. No whispers or coded language. Just a group of parents and staff working together to make the school better for their kids. By the time the meeting wrapped up, I felt a little foolish for my suspicions. As the parents gathered their things and began to file out, Mr. Bradley walked over to me again. I hope this helped clear up any questions you had, he said with an easy smile. It did, I admitted, though my tone was guarded. Thanks for letting me sit in. Of course, he replied. Jacob's lucky to have such dedicated parents. Megan beamed at the compliment, and for a moment, everything felt normal. On the drive home, she was practically glowing. See? I told you there was nothing to worry about. she said, glancing at me with a triumphant smile. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the road. It was a good meeting. You've been putting in a lot of work. She smiled wider, resting her hand on mine. Thanks for coming, Ethan. I know it's not your thing, but it means a lot to me. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Everything about the meeting had seemed fine, better than fine, even. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was missing something. Maybe I was overthinking. Or maybe the real storm hadn't hit yet. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, this is Ethan. There was a brief silence, followed by that same sharp voice. Mr. Harper, it's Ms. Riley. We need to talk. I sighed, already bracing myself for another round of accusations. Ms. Riley, I attended the PTA meeting last night. Everything seemed completely above board. If you're still insinuating something. Did it? She cut in, her tone unnervingly calm. Did it seem completely above board, Mr. Harper? Or are you just telling yourself that? Her words caught me off guard. What are you getting at? She gave a soft, almost mocking laugh. Let me ask you something. How well do you really know your wife? My grip tightened on the phone. What's that supposed to mean? Just a question, she said, her voice like silk laced with poison. Because you see, I've been at this school for 10 years. I've seen parents come and go, and I've seen the lengths some people will go to for their kids. And well, let's just say, not everyone plays by the rules. Ms. Riley, I said sharply. If you have something to say, say it. She ignored me, continuing in that same infuriatingly calm tone. Do you ever wonder why Jacob's grades improved so suddenly? Or why your wife is so involved in every aspect of school now, down to the smallest detail? Don't you think it's a little convenient? My wife is dedicated to Jacob's education, I snapped. That's all there is to it. Is it? She replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Or is there something else going on? Something you haven't noticed yet? Something right in front of you? A chill ran down my spine. If you're accusing Megan of something, just come out and say it. Ms. Riley sighed, as though I were missing the obvious. I'm not accusing anyone, Mr. Harper. I'm simply suggesting that you look a little closer. Because sometimes, the things we think are innocent, well, they're anything but. Her cryptic tone was grating on me. If you have evidence, then show it. Otherwise, stop playing these games. Oh, I don't need evidence, she said with a quiet chuckle. You're the one who needs it. I'm just giving you a nudge in the right direction. But don't wait too long, Mr. Harper. Time has a funny way of revealing the truth, and not always when it's convenient. She ended the call before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone in frustration. Her words echoed in my mind, raising questions I didn't want to ask but couldn't ignore. What exactly was I supposed to look closer at? And why did it feel like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't yet see? Ms. Riley's cryptic words wouldn't leave my head. The rest of the day at work was a blur. I barely managed to get through meetings, and every email I tried to draft ended up as a jumbled mess. What did she mean by look closer? That evening, Megan seemed her usual self. She cooked dinner while humming along to some playlist, asking Jacob about his day and reminding him about an upcoming quiz. Watching her like that, so at ease, made me wonder if I'd let Ms. Riley get in my head. But the doubts kept creeping back. After Jacob was in bed, Megan settled on the couch with her laptop, muttering something about PTA budgets. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and joined her, sitting down a little closer than usual. Long day? She asked, not looking up. Yeah, I said, taking a sip. I've just been thinking about what Ms. Riley said. Megan's fingers paused on the keyboard, and she turned to me, her brows furrowed. She called you again? Yeah, I admitted, watching her reaction. She was weird about it. Said I should look closer and started asking strange questions about you. Megan rolled her eyes, her frustration clear. That woman needs a hobby. I told you she has it out for me. She's probably bitter because Mr. Bradley listens to me more than her. I tilted my head, studying her. Why do you think that is? Because I actually get things done, she said with a shrug, returning her focus to the screen. She's all talk and no follow-through. It drives people like Mr. Bradley nuts. Her explanation was plausible, but Ms. Riley's words still gnawed at me. I decided to let it go, for now. The next day, I found myself at home earlier than usual. Megan and Jacob were out running errands, and the house was unusually quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Megan's laptop sitting open on the counter. My heart started racing. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something about Ms. Riley's cryptic tone had stirred a paranoia in me that I couldn't shake. Megan's laptop was password protected, of course, but I remembered seeing her type it once, a combination of Jacob's birthday and our anniversary. I hesitated, staring at the login screen. Was I really going to do this? Finally, I typed in the password. The screen unlocked. The first thing I noticed was a folder on the desktop labeled School Projects. It seemed innocent enough, but something about it caught my attention. I clicked it open, scrolling through files titled Fundraiser Goals and Meeting Minutes. Everything seemed normal, until I came across one file buried near the bottom. It was titled simply, Personal. A lump formed in my throat as I clicked on it. Inside were a handful of documents, none of which looked like they belonged to a PDA project. There were scanned letters, emails, even what looked like financial records. Before I could process what I was looking at, I heard the front door open. Ethan? Megan called. My stomach dropped. Quickly, I closed the folder, locked the laptop, and slid it back into its usual spot. In here, I called back, forcing a casual tone. She walked in with a grocery bag in hand, smiling. You're home early. Yeah, I said, trying to sound relaxed. Thought I'd surprise you guys and make dinner. Her face lit up. That's sweet of you. But as I stood there, watching her unpack groceries, the knot in my stomach tightened. I didn't know what I'd stumbled across, but I was starting to realize something. Ms. Riley might not have been entirely wrong. There was something Megan wasn't telling me. Later that evening, after dinner, Jacob and I sat on the living room floor, building a Lego set he'd been excited about for weeks. It was one of those massive Star Wars ships with 1,000 tiny pieces, the kind of thing that took hours but was totally worth it when you saw his face light up. We worked in silence for a while, and I couldn't help but notice how focused he was, carefully piecing together the intricate details. The kid had a knack for it. Hey, buddy, I said casually, trying to sound natural. How's school been going? Good, he said without looking up, his little fingers snapping a piece into place. Yeah? Math getting any easier? He shrugged, still focused on the pieces. Kinda. Mom's been helping a lot. I nodded, keeping my tone light. That's great. You like when Mom helps you? Sometimes, he said with a small laugh. But she's kinda intense. I chuckled. Yeah, that sounds like Mom. Jacob paused, looking thoughtful. But Mr. Bradley helps too. That caught my attention. Mr. Bradley? The principal? Yeah, he said, glancing up at me. He's really nice. He talks to Mom a lot, and he said he's proud of me for trying so hard. I forced a smile. That's nice of him. Does he talk to you a lot? Not really, Jacob said, going back to the Lego set. Mostly to Mom. Sometimes they're in his office for a long time after school. My stomach twisted. Oh yeah? What do they talk about? Jacob frowned, tilting his head as he thought. I don't know. Grown-up stuff, I guess. He paused, then added, but last week, Mom said not to tell anyone about the extra help. I froze. Extra help? What do you mean? Jacob shrugged again. She said it's like a special thing Mr. Bradley's doing for me, but it's not for every kid, so it's a secret. I tried to keep my voice steady. Did she say why it's a secret? No, he said, oblivious to the alarm bells going off in my head. She just said it's important and not to talk about it at school. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. Jacob, buddy, you can always tell me anything, okay? Even if Mom says it's a secret. He nodded, looking a little confused. Okay, Dad. Did I do something wrong? No, I said quickly, ruffling his hair. You didn't do anything wrong. You're doing great, bud. He smiled, reassured, and went back to the Lego set. But as I sat there pretending to help, my mind was spinning. What kind of extra help required secrecy? And why would Megan tell Jacob not to talk about it? Whatever it was, this was bigger than I'd thought. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what I was going to find. The questions swirling in my head were relentless. Megan's cryptic instructions to Jacob, Ms. Riley's warnings, and now this odd, extra help from Mr. Bradley, none of it added up. I knew I couldn't confront Megan again without more information. This time, I needed proof, and I needed help to get it. That's when I thought of Diane. She was a PDA regular, and someone Megan often mentioned in passing. I'd met her at a couple of school events. She was friendly, sharp, and more importantly, seemed to have a knack for sniffing out gossip. If anyone could give me insight into Megan's activities, it was her. I called Diane the next morning, doing my best to sound casual. Hi, Diane, it's Ethan Harper, Jacob's dad. We've met a few times at school events. Oh, hi, Ethan, she said, her voice warm but curious. What's up? I was wondering if you had a minute to talk about something, I said. It's about the PDA and some of the meetings Megan's been attending. There was a brief pause. Sure. What's going on? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Well, Megan's been really involved lately, and I guess I'm just trying to understand more about what's been happening at the school. Things seem different lately. Her tone shifted slightly, more serious now. Different how? It's probably nothing, I said, trying to downplay it. But I'd feel better if someone who knows the PDA well could keep an eye out for anything unusual. I hate to ask, but do you think you could help me out? Diane was quiet for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. Ethan, I don't know what's going on, but the PDA's been full of unusual lately. If you need me to keep an ear to the ground, I can do that. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. And if you see Megan or Mr. Bradley acting strange, just let me know. I know it's a weird request. No problem, she said. I'll see what I can find out. 2 days later, Diane called back. Ethan, she said, her voice low. You might want to follow Megan tonight. My heart skipped a beat. Why? What's happening? I overheard her talking to Mr. Bradley after the last meeting, Diane said. They're meeting at the Westview Hotel tonight. It sounded personal. I gripped the phone tightly, my stomach churning. Are you sure? Positive, she said. If you're looking for answers, this might be your chance. That night I sat in my car, parked near the entrance of the Westview Hotel. My hands trembled as I held my phone, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I couldn't ignore everything piling up. Around 9 p.m., I spotted Megan's car pulling into the lot. My chest tightened as I watched her step out, glancing around nervously before heading toward the entrance. A few minutes later, another car pulled in. Mr. Bradley. He walked briskly inside, carrying a small duffel bag. I waited until they were inside before slipping out of my car, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. Once I reached the hotel lobby, I hung back, keeping a careful distance. They were at the front desk, checking in together, their voices low. Megan laughed at something he said, her hand briefly brushing his arm. I followed them down the hall, my heart pounding in my ears. They stopped at a room near the end, and I ducked around the corner just as Mr. Bradley unlocked the door. Moments later, the door closed behind them. For a few seconds, I stood frozen, my mind racing. Then, driven by a mix of anger and desperation, I crept closer and positioned myself near the slightly ajar curtains. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Megan and Mr. Bradley, oblivious to the world outside, were tangled together, completely consumed in each other. My hands shook as I snapped a few photos, each click of the camera feeling like a knife twisting in my chest. I stumbled back to my car, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. I had the proof I needed, but at what cost? My heart felt shattered, but one thing was clear: there was no going back from this. The drive home was a blur. My mind replayed what I'd just seen over and over again, each image more painful than the last. The betrayal felt unreal, like some terrible dream I couldn't wake up from. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet. Jacob was already asleep, and Megan wouldn't be home for a while. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the photos on my phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through them, each one a brutal confirmation of everything I didn't want to believe. I had proof now, proof that Megan wasn't who I thought she was. Proof that my family was built on a lie. But what was I supposed to do with it? I went inside, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat in the darkened living room. My mind raced through the possibilities: confrontation, divorce, custody battles. Every scenario felt more painful than the last. Around midnight, I heard the familiar sound of Megan's car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded as the front door creaked open. "Ethan?" she called softly. "In here," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She appeared in the doorway, looking surprised to find me sitting in the dark. "You're still up?" "Couldn't sleep," I said, taking a sip of whiskey. "How was your meeting?" Her expression didn't falter. "Fine. We went over some details for the next fundraiser. Nothing exciting." I stared at her, my stomach churning at how easily the lies rolled off her tongue. "Is that all?" She hesitated for the briefest moment, then smiled. "Of course." "Why?" I shrugged, leaning back in my chair. "No reason. Just wanted to know if there was anything interesting going on." She laughed lightly, walking over and kissing the top of my head. "You're always so curious about the PTA lately. You could just join, you know." I forced a smile, the weight of the photos in my pocket burning against my leg. "Maybe I should." She didn't notice the edge in my voice or the tension in my posture. She kissed me goodnight and headed upstairs, leaving me alone in the dark. The next day, I called Diane again. "I need your help one more time," I said, my voice low. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked, concern lacing her words. "I got the proof," I said flatly. "Now I need to figure out what to do with it." There was a pause before Diane spoke again. "What do you mean, what to do with it?" "Ethan, you have to confront her. You can't let this continue." "I know," I said, rubbing my temples. "But I have to be smart about it. This isn't just about me and Megan, it's about Jacob, too. I need to protect him." Diane sighed. "If you need support, let me know. But don't wait too long, Ethan. Secrets like this, they only fester." That night, I sat alone in the living room again, the photos spread out on the coffee table in front of me. Each one felt like a dagger in my chest, but I couldn't stop looking at them. The confrontation was coming. I could feel it like a storm on the horizon. But I had to play this carefully, because once the truth was out, there would be no turning back. I decided if this was going to end, it wasn't going to be with a screaming match or dramatic tears. No, I wanted Megan to feel the weight of her choices, the absurdity of it all. I wanted her to know that I wasn't some oblivious fool. The opportunity came on a Friday night. Jacob was at a sleepover, and Megan had just poured herself a glass of wine, settling onto the couch. She looked so at ease, scrolling through her phone like nothing in the world was wrong. I sat down across from her, holding a small box I'd prepared earlier. "What's that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Just something I thought you'd like," I said, sliding the box across the table. She looked at me suspiciously, then set her wine down and picked up the box. "What's the occasion?" "Call it, a little something for all your hard work with the PTA," I said, smiling faintly. She opened the box and froze. Inside was a small, glossy photo, one of the pictures I'd taken of her and Mr. Bradley in the hotel room. Her face turned white as she stared at it, her fingers trembling. "Ethan, what is this?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. That, my dear wife, is what I like to call undeniable proof. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. This isn't what it looks like. I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head. Oh, Megan, I think this is exactly what it looks like. But please, go ahead. Explain it to me. I'm dying to hear how you and Mr. Bradley just happened to be caught in the middle of whatever this is. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she stammered. It's not about us, it's about Jacob. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, my tone calm but cutting. I understand that while I've been working my tail off to provide for this family, you've been busy. Fundraising. Her face flushed red, and she stood abruptly, the box tumbling to the floor. It's not like that, Ethan. Then what's it like, Megan? I snapped, standing as well. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been trading more than just PDA strategies with Mr. Bradley. Her voice cracked as she said, I did it for Jacob. I wanted him to succeed. You've been so distant and I thought. You thought what? I interrupted, my voice rising. That screwing the principal was the best way to help our son. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let up. Megan, you lied to me. You lied to Jacob. And for what? Better grades? A glowing recommendation? At what cost? She sank back onto the couch, her head in her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I sighed, my anger cooling slightly as I sat back down. You know, Megan, if you'd come to me and told me Jacob needed more help, I would have done anything for him. We could have hired tutors, gotten him whatever resources he needed. But you didn't. You made this choice, and now we're here. She didn't say anything, just sat there sobbing quietly. After a long silence, I stood. I don't know what happens next, but I know one thing, this marriage? It's over. I'll talk to a lawyer on Monday. Her head shot up, her face streaked with tears. Ethan, please. No, I said firmly, cutting her off. You made your bed, Megan. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving her sitting there with the photo still on the floor. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. My life had just fallen apart, but at least now, I had clarity. And honestly, there was something satisfying about knowing Megan would have to explain herself to the PDA when this all came out. The whole thing was absurd, painful, and surreal, but I knew one thing for sure, I'd be okay. Eventually.